Welcome back to the Enlightened Misfits podcast. I am your host, Lauren, and in today's episode, I have Constantin. He is a transformation performance coach for thought leaders and a shaman healer and channeler. Welcome. I'm so happy to have this conversation with you.
Likewise, Laura, it's such a pleasure to be here.
So tell us a little bit about your story. I know you can do the Cliff Notes version if you want, but tell us a little bit about how the mind, body, and soul connection, share a little bit about your awakening, the divine creator within you, not just the outer world
Mhm,
and
mhm.
our external reality, especially for entrepreneurs. Like, where did yours start?
Yeah, well, I love the question. I guess it all starts with my background. I was born in Eastern Europe during the communist time, and that meant that the type of upbringing I had a huge influence on how most of my life played out, especially in my early adulthood, which was all around working hard, chasing money, essentially chasing the material success, because we didn't have that growing up, and my parents never had, and my grandparents, and the lineage didn't have any of that. So I was very much stuck in that mind aspect of it, right? From the mind, body, soul. There wasn't a whole lot of bringing them all together. And when I talk about mind, body, soul these days, it's about how do we actually leverage all the gifts that we come into this life with. We know that we are a soul having a human experience. So why are we not tapping into that power that we have with a connection with our higher self, with God, with the universe, whatever you believe in? And then how does one get there? Through the body. Your body holds so many beautiful messages and so many beautiful secrets and gifts, but we never tap into them. And that was me as well, Lauren. I never tapped into it. And I
Mhm.
was so stuck in following blueprints and advice from other people, always chasing things external of me, not realizing that we actually hold all the answers, right? You hold all the answers within you. You just need time to go in to find them.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I was going to say, when you speak a little bit about your body, I think I speak for a lot of us. I probably could speak for all of us. But when it comes to your body and it's that like, would you agree that it's that trauma or maybe past experiences or fear that gets stuck in our body that holds us back from maybe even realizing it is our body that,
Yeah,
um,
there's definitely a big part of it. I mean, the way I see it, Lauren, is that science tells us this and spirituality does as well. So we co-create our life, right? We create our reality. Now, if we look at science, what does science show us? That our thoughts and our beliefs lead to emotions and feelings, and then they
mhm,
lead to actions and outcomes. So they create your life. Now, all of that is impacted by your environment. Your environment triggers all of this. So you grow up, let's say you're 2 years old, your parents have an argument next to your crib. You absorb all of that. Your subconscious mind is so powerful, it takes it all in. Now, that
mhm.
can be stored as trauma, that can be stored as something unpleasant, anxiety, you name it. I mean, it will get stored somehow. And then later on, it may get triggered without you even realizing what's going on. And these patterns start to form in your subconscious and they become your beliefs. And then when something happens in life, you walk into your manager's office and they start to berate you, or they're like, no, you're not getting the promotion. These old beliefs start to come up. You're not good enough. You're to be abandoned, you're to be rejected, whatever the case might be. We're all different in that way, but we all suffer with very similar things.
Yes, I agree. And speaking about the not enough or abandonment wound, I feel like all of us have all of those wounds. And
Mhm.
that reminds me of, I just had a conversation with a client the other day, actually yesterday, or maybe it was the other day. And she had mentioned about her principal. She was doing a test. It must have been high school. I think she said high school. Um, Middle school or something, and she finished a test early. The teacher told her she could read a book. Well, apparently the principal came in the room, and fast forward, or let me rewind to why I'm even saying this.
Yeah.
And she told me that she's like, I don't feel like, my parents ever, gave me trauma for when I was a kid or whatever. I was like, well, what about, like, I'm trying to get her to remember like something. Sometimes, like, when we have a lot of trauma, we block it out. So it's like she couldn't remember where this came from, and I needed that story because needed to rewrite it. Kind of how you're saying, like, that when you're 3 years old and your parents have an argument by your said, that gets absorbed and maybe you don't even realize it, but you remember it when you kind of go back into your body or mind and kind of like relive that. Not that I wanted her to relive it, but I wanted her to feel the way that she felt. So anyway, so the principal came into the room and took the book in front of everybody in the class. So she said, we were working on a wound of judgment. And I said, well, how did you feel when that happened? She said, I felt very judged. Like everybody was like looking at me. I felt embarrassed. And I was like bringing up all of these feelings from this time. Now, at the time, I didn't tell her it was the wound of judgment. I don't, that's not how I usually operate. Like I usually just have people tell me how they feel. And then eventually she was like, that is exactly where that wound stemmed from. And I feel like just that connection, I feel like if you have a mentor, guide, healer, whatever, help you get to that point, I feel like that's very powerful. It was for me anyway. So that's kind of how I also teach other people, because then she probably had a belief that she's not enough because she, didn't follow directions after her teacher told her she could. And the principal was like, not okay with that. Of course, embarrassed or whatever other feelings that came up for that. So I feel like breaking through that for her is going to be huge. And I think just in general, I think when I brought myself back to my 6-year-old self where my trauma had started and it just every year had, piled on to that, I feel like just being able to talk to my 6-year-old self, and get guidance from her, or it's not your fault, this is not your, I always felt like it was my fault when
Yeah,
things went wrong, or I felt like I was wrong, or I was told I was wrong. That carries a lot of shame too, so, or guilt or whatever, so I feel like breaking through that, definitely has helped my narrative anyway, and I'm sure a lot of other people.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I see your role and my role in the work that we do as simply guides, like helping people find their own answers.
Hmm.
Like I know a lot of stuff, you do know a lot of stuff, other people know as well, but really I
Hmm.
don't know your answers. What
Right.
I can do best is to guide you to find your own answers through the knowledge I have acquired, through the connection I have with the divine, with my angelic guides and my shamanic guides. And that's it. And then it's so powerful because you watch others you work with, paid or unpaid, doesn't really matter, like whoever share space with you, transform in front of your eyes, because you plant seeds, and then those seeds grow into something beautiful that lets them find their own answers.
Right. Yeah, I tell that, talking about planting seeds is, when I have a couple students right now doing the shamanic journey, and I always have to remind them that when I place you with these rites, these are just seeds and you have to water and grow them. It doesn't mean you're going to be a magical healer. You're going to go through a lot of transformations. I do know that I've done Reiki, I've done emotion body code, I've done theta, I've done all this stuff. But I feel like when I went through the shamanic journey myself, and I've done other psychic things, mediumship, all that stuff. And I feel like the shamanic journey was probably the most transformative, very quick. Oh my God, I have to now look at things I didn't want to look at for like the longest time. But it was those seeds that I planted, that were planted, I water them and they grow.
Yeah.
Just just like a flower. You plant the seed, you water it, and it grows. But if you don't water it, it's not going to grow. And if it's in a bad environment, it's still not going to grow. So I always tell people, you're just a plant. That's it. You have emotions. That's all it is. You know, we're just plants with emotions.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, when the shamanic path opened up for me, it has been the most powerful thing I've ever done. I mean, I get to do shamanic journeys once, twice, 3 times a week, depending on the week, and the revelations and the messages and the breakthroughs like nothing I've experienced before. And I've sat with plant medicine over the last few years. I can go deep in meditation, and definitely, the shamanic path has been something that seems to be in my cards and in my lineage, both from the family I was born in as well as my other past lives. And it may not be for everyone. And it's
Right.
something that as you open yourself up to possibilities, you will realize very fast if something is for you or not, if something calls to you or not. And it's the same with all the practices that one can go through. You mentioned all the various healing modalities. I mean, with my clients, for example, I use various healing modalities, but at the same time, I also have something like 120 plus techniques and tools I can use. Not
Hmm.
all of them are going to work for you. Like
Right.
most of them are not. But the ones that will, you can take them and make them your own, and they're going to be with you for life, or at least for this period of time where you need them most.
Right. Yeah. Now tell us, I'm so intrigued. Tell us a little bit about like your healing through shamanism. So like how did or how I should say, I want your perspective on how people can use shamanism, the shamanism practices to help maybe address those deep seated traumas and only manifest. I feel like they often manifest as self-doubt and limiting beliefs. So how do you teach your clients or do you show your clients how to use those shamanic practices to help address those
That's a
deep
great
traumas?
question. So I'll take it a step back, right? So I see as some of my gifts, right, is the ability to blend what I call the tangible and the intangible, meaning the science side of it with the spiritual side of it.
Hmm.
A lot of what I do is rooted in psychology, neuroscience, because that's what most of us truly understand and can get behind.
Yeah.
The spiritual aspects open up for many of us later in life. And a lot of my clients come to me when the spot where they breach from one world to the other, meaning from the mundane world, the science side to the spiritual side. It doesn't mean that you're going to leave one world behind when you move to the next. It's about blending them together and
Yeah.
getting the best of both worlds. Now, the shamanic path, that's not something I teach others. I use my gifts as a shaman, as a healer, and as a channeler to infuse what I do with my clients and with anyone. For example, this retreat I'm hosting in November, I will bring all these gifts with me. But it's not about teaching you to become a shaman or a hero channel. That's for you to decide if that's your path, or for let's say your higher self to bring that up for you. Because check this out, I'm 41 years old, Lauren. Until I was like 38, 39, I didn't even know I had any of these abilities.
Oh
And
wow. Okay.
I remember I was doing a deep breathwork meditation with one of the facilitators I'll have at this retreat. And there was a transformative experience where essentially I was talking to my guides, or they came to me, I should say, and they were telling me at the end of this deep breathwork meditation, there was an hour and a half. They're like, now you remember your healing and channeling abilities. And I remember just laughing. I'm like, really? Me as a healer, as a channeler? Come on. Like, my
Yeah.
background is mathematics, computer science, psychology,
Yeah.
project management, organization change management. Like, come on, let's be serious. And then they do something beautiful that they always do. Every time they give me this big breakthrough, it's like, hey, you're gonna now do this. You're gonna see how it aligns with your path. I'm like, I don't know. They always have examples. Like, look back at your life. You've already done this. You just didn't realize it. And I was like, they literally gave me examples. You channeled like 20 minutes ago, or however, like an hour ago, they told me, you provide healing to this friend of yours about was it 2 days prior by you sharing this. And she even told you that you sharing the story allowed her to heal certain wounds, but you never paid attention to it.
Yeah.
So when it comes to my clients, I bring these gifts with me, and then they'll find their own answers, right? They'll probably have similar epiphanies. But the
Hmm.
idea is that I'm not here to push an agenda or another. Like, you
Right.
will find your path. The best I can do for you is to be alongside you, create this beautiful community, be this beautiful space where you get to not only get to know yourself better, you get
Mhm.
to heal, you get to step into your true authentic self. I talk a lot about this idea of shining your light bright, because I see my mission and vision in life is to just shine my light bright. And in doing so, I get to inspire others, empower others to do the same, to shine their light bright. And how I shine my light is going to be different than how you shine your light. And that's perfectly fine, because the world needs exactly what you have to offer, and the world needs what I have to offer uniquely as well.
Right.
And there's room for all of us. There's abundance everywhere.
Right. I love that. And I love that you spoke upon this subject too, because I feel like with spirituality coming to be like more society accepted and like, healing and holistic healing and all that is more accepted now than it's ever been. Like I probably knew about my gifts when I was very, very young and I just kind of pushed them away because I would say different things. And then people would look at me like, you're crazy. Oh my God, you're psycho, all this stuff. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
if I'm a psycho, what are you? Like all that stuff. So I just kind of pushed them away. I've always kind of did it in like the closet. kind of thing. Like I did witchcraft. It was just, it's not bad witchcraft. I just call it's more like manipulating energy. It's the same thing. We're all just trying to manipulate the energy to like manifest whatever we desire and all that stuff. So, but I've noticed through the spiritual community, especially on TikTok or Instagram, people are using it out of ego, and it like makes me so angry because these people are like, oh, this girl told me this and that I'm going to go do this, and I'm like, well, what are you telling yourself? Right? So I'm glad that you spoke upon that. You don't give answers, that you just help people find their own. And I feel like that's truly the I don't want to say anything is right or wrong, but I feel like that is the healthy way. Let's just use
Well,
that.
let's step into that a bit, because I love that you brought it there. What I believe to be the case, and what I'm seeing, is that this is a world of free will. So this universe that we're in, this illusion we're in, it's one of free will, one of duality, one of polarity,
Mm-hmm.
which means that you will have the shadow and you have the light as options on any either path you take. And you're likely gonna, at different times, you're gonna be more in the light and sometimes more in the shadow.
Yeah.
There is no good, bad, or indifferent in this illusion. Only we make it to be that way, right? Things just are. We put a perspective that says, well, that's bad, or oh, that's good, because of our own belief systems and what society may dictate, or the group you belong to. So if we believe that this is a free will world and one where we have polarity and duality, then we can look at what this entire environment has become, where people are just looking for us and experience. In other words, like, you're going to come to me and say, oh, give me the answer. I know you have the answer because you're a healer, you're a shaman, you can channel. Tell me the answer. And I was talking to, wasn't a client, was someone that I was just chatting with networking last week, and I had some messages come up, because when I channel, sometimes it's spontaneous. I get messages to share with the people. Sometimes I have to be asked, but I
Mm-hmm.
had some messages for her that came through. They were really powerful. But then it turned into her asking me more. It's like, oh, ask this question, and almost all the questions are around, should I do this, should I do that? And if you think about that for a second, if you come to me, or any channeler, doesn't matter, or any person that can speak to the other side or bring messages to you, if this is a world of free will, would your guides, would your God, your higher self tell you what to do? Would they be like, oh, you gotta do A, B, and C?
Mm-hmm.
Or would they give you options and say, well, I'll consider this for this reason, or you might regret this, or you might not regret this? So asking better questions is something that I
Yeah.
cannot stress enough with all my clients. Asking better questions of ourselves, right? So instead of saying, should I be doing this? What I guide people to do is, how can we rephrase that so you can come up to your own answer based on the guidance you receive? Is this something that will be in my highest interest to pursue?
Yeah.
Yes or no? If I go down this path, will I regret it when I get to the end of it? Yes or no? Because as soon as you say, should I do this, or
Mm-hmm.
can I do this, you're giving your power away again. And
Right.
if anything I've learned on this path is that all spirit wants, all you want, is really to stand in your truth, stand in your power. Because we are such powerful beings, creators, divine leaders in our life, but most of us don't know it. I didn't know it for like 38 years of my life.
Yeah. And that's just when people say, oh, I'm too old, I'm 40, whatever, I'm like, well, you're still here. What do you mean you're too old? Like, that's not old. 40, 50 is not old. Now if you told me you're 80 or 90 and you have like all these health problems and whatever, that is different. But like, when 40-year-olds or 50-year-olds tell me they're too old to change, no, you're not. You can change tomorrow if you wanted to. Like, that is your choice. But you could also choose not to change. Like, that's fine. I don't, whatever, I don't have any judgment on that. But
Exactly. It's a
love
choice
that
you
you,
make.
yeah, I love that you said that about asking better questions, because I have a client and she'll know who she is when I say this. And I'm not calling her out, but when I tell her all the time, when she'll say, can you help me channel, or can you help me ask my higher self? And I'm like, these are the questions that I want you to ask your higher self. Stop using the word should, take it out of your vocabulary. Which yes or no questions, or like you said, just for the best and highest good of all, or best and highest good for myself, or whatever. But when she says, should I do this or that? Because your higher self, you're going to get a yes, for both. Like they're not going to tell you no, yes. Like when I ask different things like that, sometimes I might not ask like the best questions for myself. And I usually I'll hear, you should be doing. It's whatever I'm resisting is probably what I should be doing. That type of thing. So it's like you have to just know. I always just say, I can channel your higher self, sure, but you are the best person to channel your higher self. So ask your higher self different questions. Or you can, if you do pendulum work or whatever, I tell people, it's gonna tell you most of the time, rephrase your question because you're not asking it right. So she did say, she said, well, yeah, that's funny that you say that. How did you know that? And I was like, how did I know what? And she was like, I did ask my pendulum like 10 minutes ago, and it said rephrase. I'm like, so rephrase it. What are you asking me for?
Yeah, it reminds me. So one of the things I do in my practices is I take nowadays multiple days off in a row if I want to, usually 2 days, Saturday, Sunday, to go deep, introspect, connect with my guides, connect through my shamanic work, through other spiritual work. And I was at a place I love at a spa this past weekend, just by myself meditating. And I was asking a lot of questions around the retreat I have coming up in November because I had some worries to fill the last few seats of the retreat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was asking, not realizing, like you just said, I was asking questions that were guided more from ego, more from a material side of things, because the way we priced the retreat, very reasonable, but it was one price model that was very rooted in, let's call it the status quo, how people have been doing things for a while.
Okay.
And then they challenged me with a question. They said, well, because when I priced it with my business partner, we just said, okay, that makes sense. It's a price. Perfect. $3,000 a person for 5 days in immersive in Costa Rica, right? And I never even thought a second about it, right? And then my guides are like, well, you've been trying to chase people to come to this retreat. Why not look at it from an attraction point of view? Because you want to be attracting, you don't want to be chasing. If you attract, then you're in your being. Then you're just being, and people just come to you because they resonate with what you talk about, they resonate, they want to be with you.
Right.
And you know that you have people that want to come, but can't necessarily afford the very reasonable price you put on.
Right.
So then they're like, have you asked yourself enough questions in that area? And long story short, what came out, it took about 4 hours, maybe 5 hours actually, of me introspecting, going back and forth to come to this, to get the ego out of the way as much as possible, to come to a model where it's now pay from the heart. Meaning that, yes, some people, there's a few tiered models, but like there are some people that would love to be there and would love to be partially sponsored because even though they could use the healing, the transformation, they don't have the financial means yet to be part of it. And when they opened up the door for me because they asked me to ask better questions, I'm like, how could I not see this before? Because it's so easy, it's so simple once you look at it. But like
Yeah.
for 2 months leading up to this, I couldn't see it.
Right.
Because why? And this is why I brought this up, why? Because I never asked better questions. I never questioned the pricing model. I never questioned. I said, oh, every retreat is doing this, I'm going to do it too.
Right. Right.
And that's how we lead life. It's like, oh, Sue and Mike are doing this, I'm going to do it too. And that's
Right.
what coming back is like, ask better questions. Should you be doing it that way?
Yes. Yeah, I was gonna say if anybody has not got, hopefully you got a lot from this episode, but if anybody has not got anything, know that ask better questions. That is the best. And I feel like that's with anything. It could be any possible area of your life. I feel like you just have to ask better questions. And I'm very well, I feel like I'm pretty good. Two of the things my own mentor says and people on the podcast say is they're like, where do you get your questions from? I was like, most of the time they're channeled. And obviously, I was like, I'm a very good listener and I listen to what the other person is saying. And that's how I ask questions. So I actually started doing that for myself too when I'm meditating. And
Yes.
it actually comes so much quicker than me like, well, what if this? And I do the same thing too. I actually was going to plan a retreat to Costa Rica. Did you say you're going to Costa Rica?
Yeah, that's where we are in a month.
That is,
14.
so I was actually planning a Costa Rica trip for next year, but we're actually going to do 2026.
Very nice, very nice. That's awesome.
Yeah. And what I had told the other girl, I said to her, the way that I usually market or message is I pick an avatar and then we market to that person. And it's just that one person, like the client avatar, because then we attract, because she's like, we have to find people, and I'm like, whoa, no, we don't have to find anybody. We have to make our messaging and marketing very good, and then people, I mean, it's Costa Rica, people want to, we don't have to sell Costa Rica, but we have to sell what we are, we're doing in Costa
Spending
Rica.
time with you. Yeah.
Right. So I said, and most of the time people want to make it a vacation. So we have to make it a more, there will be some times that we're going to do like healing stuff, but people don't want to go to a different country and do healing stuff all week. Like, it's just not, like that's just not what they want to do. I mean, that's just not what I envision. If I'm like, what would I want to do? So I always ask myself, what would I want to do? Because most of the time people that you're attracting, they're usually a past version of you or a current version of you. So that's
Exactly.
how
Exactly.
I usually
That's
that's
how
how
I
I
did.
usually market stuff.
That's how I prep mine. I mean, so this is the first time we're hosting. I have a business partner I'm doing this with, but my
Mhm.
vision is to do these every 2 to 3 months because I know the power of being in immersive groups. And there was something that my guys gave me a while back, the idea that this journey is not meant to be done alone, yet alone is how we realize this, because you have to be in your own misery for a bit of time to realize that maybe you shouldn't be doing this alone. Because that was me for 2 years of my deepest depression, suicidal thoughts, and anxiety. I tried to do it all myself, and sure, I did parts of it, but it would have
Yeah,
been so much easier and faster if I surrounded myself with um, or not even surround, allow people to be in my field and allow them to help me, and for me to ask for that help, which of course high achievers like you and I have a very hard time doing, because you're taught to do it all yourself. Like, you can't ask for help, you can't show weakness, because
yeah,
then they'll see you're not enough, then they'll see you're not good enough, you don't have enough, you don't know enough.
yeah. I was gonna say I want to talk about the enoughness wound. So
Yes.
I know we were talking before we started recording. And I was like, oh God, I wish we would have started recording before then, because we said a lot. You said a lot of good things about that. So I know for me, a lot of my clients just think it's very surface level, like it's rejection wound, it's abandonment, it's denial, it's suppression, whatever it is. But can you kind of explain how you do it, like from the symptoms?
Yes, exactly. So I see it in 4 tiers right now. So let's start with what most of us can relate with right away. You feel anxiety, you feel stressed, you feel burnout, you feel overwhelmed, you feel hesitation, you may procrastinate. All those things I call are symptoms, right? They show up in many of our lives, especially for high achievers and top performers, people that are successful in one area of their life. And then it's about asking better questions. Well, what's causing procrastination? What's causing this imposter syndrome? And if you do some research, what tends to come up are things such as core human fears. So, fear of failure. How does fear of failure cause procrastination? Well, if you don't get a thing done, you're never going to fail, right?
Right.
Because then you don't know if you did it good or not, as an example, right?
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome. Well, that's fear of rejection and abandonment together, right? Because imposter syndrome is all about like, oh my God, if they catch me, I'm done.
Right.
I'm not good enough for this, right? And then what's going to happen? You're going to get abandoned. You're going to be rejected.
Right.
Fear of failure gets thrown in there as well, right? So all these core human fears start to show up as the root cause. But what I've come to realize in my journey, and this was such a huge breakthrough for me, is that you don't actually go from symptom to the core fear right away. So symptom is what I call tier 0, core fear is tier 2, and there's a tier in between them, what I call tier 1, which is your what I call decoy fears. So in other words, we know that if you face a fear head on and you can prove that the fear is not always true, then it dissipates, it disappears. It's an illusion. Fear is an illusion. So if let's
Right.
say I have proof, let's say I feel imposter syndrome in my work, right? And then I realize it's okay, this is fear of rejection. And I get to the core of it. I work my way down. And then I have proof that that's not the case, because we always have proof in our life if we look for it. Then that fear disappears and never bothers you again in that scenario. It may show up somewhere else where you need to go do the work. But the decoy fears, they act to prevent you from getting to the core fear where you can essentially eliminate it. So I'll give you an example. I had an opportunity a few months back to go to Tampa, Florida from East Coast Canada here, to be in a room with some really, really successful people, billionaires with B, right? Lots of successful entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And I got so excited. I'm like, man, I gotta go. And it was just like a week away from a Thursday to the next Thursday. And I was like, man, I want to go. I was so excited, right? But
Yeah.
then my brain caught up, my ego caught up, and all of a sudden fears came up. The first fear, oh, but you don't want to let your dogs leave your dogs behind for like 3 days because you walk them every day and you do all these things. Nah, that's not gonna work. And then I worked through it and I'm like, no, that's not true. And I have my partner home, I have friends I can call over, they can take care of the dogs, no problem. Well, that wasn't good enough. Then the next fear came up. Well, how are you gonna take the time off? You have so many appointments booked next week. It's gonna be, a shame to cancel those and go through that, right? So that's another fear
Yeah.
of like disappointing people and having to move. No, I worked through that, no problem. And the more I worked through these decoy fears, the more popped up to the point that they overwhelmed me. And despite
Mhm.
having all these tools, that day was a wash. I kind of left and did other things because I just mentally I couldn't get there, and I couldn't get myself in a spiritual space to actually work through it. But I have a pretty beautiful meditation practice. So at night I did one that cleared quite a bit, and then in the morning I went deep in meditation, and it finally came through that the real fear behind all of it was the fear of change. Realizing that because I'm stepping up into the shining my light bright area, like really being truly me authentically, it's going to require me to change quite a few things, meaning traveling away from home. And that's that safety that we all created, right? Our homes is our safe sanctuary.
Yeah.
So for me, it was this deep fear of change, which is a deep fear within all of humans. But it was throwing out these decoy fears because it knew that once I got to it, it was game over. And check this out. So I got through it. The fact that I went to Tampa or not is not relevant to the story, but what's relevant is that not only 4 days later, I booked this first retreat in Costa Rica,
Wow.
right? And it was done within 12 hours of me thinking, because I was like, okay, the dates were given through spirit.
Right.
What we're gonna do is through spirit. The place I started to look, I found it within like 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And it was the perfect spiritual place. A beautiful villa in Costa Rica, 2 minutes from the beach, pool, private chef, you name it.
Yeah.
And why? Because I was able to work through this wound, through this fear that was actually holding me back from actually stepping fully into my power. And guess what? I'll be away for like 2 weeks as opposed to just 3 days. And none of those fears, leaving my dogs with someone else,
Yeah.
finding the time, the money, all the stuff, no more there because I had done the work and I didn't even realize that was actually preparing me for the next step.
Wow.
So so now what we're seeing is tier 0, tier 1, tier 2. So we again symptoms, decoy fears, the core human fears. And then what I had realized in the process is that there is actually one, let's call it human binding fear that all of us struggle with in some way or another, but most of us don't know. And I didn't know either. Is that fear of enoughness, which you touched upon. Because if you think about like fear of rejection, right? What does it stem from? Well, if you're going to be rejected, that means you're not good enough. You haven't done enough. You haven't achieved enough. If you have fear of abandonment, can that go to enoughness? Of course. You're not enough, so then your parents or your family or whoever abandoned you. I mean, this is very true for young children. When, let's say the parents split up, right? And then you grow up in a family of just one parent or no parents. You talked about blaming yourself, right? I mean, I've worked with so many clients where this was a big core one because they felt deep down that they weren't enough. That's why their father or mother left.
Yeah.
Even if a parent passed away, that's the same subconscious model that plays the game.
Yeah.
And this is before we even tie in past lives and lineage and any of that stuff that can get this very complicated, but it doesn't have to be. So hopefully that gives the audience more of an idea because you and I talked about this, but really, once you get down to the fear of enoughness, you can
Hmm.
start to clear very, very fast because that's the root of pretty much every challenge in your life.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say for me, just a little bit touch on that is I grew up in a household of two parents, right? So I've always thought to myself, well, why had both of my parents physically were there, right? Why do I have this feeling of, abandonment? Or why do I would always ask, like, show me why. That's usually how I ask questions. Show me why this is happening, or show me why I should do this, or whatever. So then it's like physically, okay. Sometimes I'm like, okay, show me again because I didn't get it. Show me, you know.
Oh yeah,
Um,
sometimes you have to see it from so many angles for
yeah,
us to understand, right? I mean, I could be telling you something which is 100% true,
yeah,
and you won't see it. Then five people come along, they'll tell you it in a different way, and then the sixth one comes along, and you're like, oh my god, now I see it.
yeah.
And then you can connect all the dots and be like, ah, okay, now I
Yeah,
get the full
like
picture.
now I'm getting it. Usually it's
Yeah.
like, really? Show me again. So anyway, so for me, I didn't come from a divorced family. I am divorced, but I realized that um it went a little bit further than that. It took me a while. It took me a little bit to realize that I cannot raise my daughter in a toxic household, especially because I've grown so much. I went through my own spiritual awakening.
Yes.
I've asked spirit, show me if this is going to be okay if I do this, because I always heard you need to leave. And I'm like, well,
Okay.
financially, I was able to leave, financially, I was the one that supported all of us, so I think it was more of like, I don't want to raise my daughter as a single mom. That's not, that was not the goal. Like the goal was for
Sure.
her just to be healthy. And I just kept trusting, I think, in myself to know that my higher self, spirit, source, God, whoever, I just go by spirit, would not direct me into a place of just like disaster that my, ego helps me go into, chaos. But more of like that whole trust factor. I just trust in myself that, making this decision of, sure, I'm divorced. My parents, aren't divorced. And my mom kind of talked about, to me, she's like, I've never been divorced long, but I know what it feels like to lose a partner. And it's kind of like you have to mourn somebody that's still on earth, but not in your life. So I didn't realize that was a whole process too.
Yeah.
And on top of that,
I feel it. I
having
mean, I'm
kids.
divorced as well, so I know exactly how that
Yeah.
goes.
So it's like, okay, so how am I supposed to mourn this person that now I have to I have a child with? Now I have to always see him, but spirit took care of that too. We don't have communication. I have no ties to him just because the abuse was so bad that there's just protection around that. But they are allowed, he can have the relationship that he wants with my daughter, or our daughter. So it's like, I don't have, and I like it that way because I'm
Yeah.
out of it. You decide how you guys are going to have a relationship, and that's it. Because I feel like a lot of relationships now, sometimes the mom or dad, whoever, is still hurting and they place that upon the child. And then the child feels like, my parents split up for me. And I always remind my daughter, she's actually 4.5 now. So she's very conscious, like I've raised her that way. So she's asking questions. You were married to my dad. And I was like, yes. What happened? She's like, why aren't you married anymore? And I'm like, oh, we view things different in life, Lily. Like just different. I'm not lying to her, but I'm telling her in a way that like she's so she knows that it's not her fault. I'm like,
Yes.
we
Yeah.
just kind of grew apart. So I basically have now said we've just grown apart. We're two different people. And then she just doesn't say anything, like she just doesn't know what to say. But I have a feeling that I just don't want her to know. Like, I just don't want her to think that it's her fault, because on her dad's side, I know for a fact it's probably completely opposite. It's always mom's fault. It's your mom's fault, like all that stuff. So going back to that, what you said is, I feel like a lot of kids, especially in my generation, their parents were divorced. So I think that wound probably is very heightened for them, because they probably feel like if they were a better child, or if they did something different or whatever, their parents would still be together. And it's like that fact to know that, like, if they only knew that it's not their fault, like that, I think that would be huge for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from all the clients I've worked with, and these are some of the most successful people in corporate and entrepreneurial world, and
Yeah.
it's interesting to see how many of us are driven by this fear of enoughness and the fear of failure and abandonment and rejection, because you grew up in a family that was, there's a lot of people that now have a lot of success, but they were very poor growing up, right? So what was driving them? Yes, they wanted to make a difference in the world, which is coming from the heart, but then They're like, I never want to be poor again, which is coming more or less from the material side of things, which again, nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Yet, if you truly want to find the joy, the fulfillment that we're all seeking, that peace, that ease, that love in our life, we can't just be chasing more and more, because what's going to happen? You're never going to find it. You're going to get the next milestone and you're going to realize, well, this wasn't it. And I'm going to go for the next one. That was my life. I mean, I guess I was very successful in corporate and got promotion after promotion, shiny toys and material success and recognition. And with every milestone, the bigger the target post got, the more unfulfilled I was, the more I lacked joy, the more depressed and anxious and suicidal I was. How did that make sense? I had the American dream. Why would I be like that? And I
Right.
feel like that's like a lot of us. If you're listening to this, you probably have faced it at some point in your life, or at least know someone that has faced that or is facing it right now, silently for the most part.
Yeah. I was going to say, yes, definitely silently. I know for me, people ask me all the time, Lauren, why would you leave your successful, I worked in healthcare. I was a high risk OB ultrasound tech. So I made a
Mm.
lot of money. I made six figures. I did other things, network marketing. I've always had all these extra jobs, always like high achiever. But I feel like looking back on it now, if I didn't have that wound of enoughness and I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't be so successful, or I probably wouldn't be like that, very driven, hardworking. But it was more of like that was just instilled in me when I was very young. It was, my parents had very high expectations. You have to get this in school. You have to get A's in school. You have to do this. You have to
Yep,
do that
yep,
to make a
same.
lot of money. So that always kind of been my driving force to do things. Now, not so much. The way that my human design, I'm a projector in human design. So the way that my energy works is I work less and I actually make more money. So like when I'm on vacation or I'm not actually seeing clients, I actually make more money. It's just wild.
Well,
So
yeah,
I'm
because
like,
you
how
start
do
changing,
I,
you start attracting, right? That's really why it
yeah,
comes down to. And we talked about that. And like you
yeah,
said, the reason you've been successful, and it's funny because as you're talking about what came to me, a message was like, yeah, because you changed the definition of success from material success
yeah,
to that's what I call sometimes true success, which is looking at it holistically. We talked about mind, body, soul before. It's like, what does success look across the three of them? When you bring spirit in, when you bring all of it, is it going to be just about material success, like the money in your bank account, the shiny toys you have in your driveway or in the home? Not really, right? I mean, that's part of it, sure,
yeah,
but it's not the majority of it or the most of it.
yeah. No, I definitely had to change the definition of success. I know the world. I know one of my favorite motivational speakers, Gary Vee. He talks about success in the way that it's the world says it. And for me, success is how my client or the other person can change their life. So like if I'm teaching them, like I also want to teach them how to teach themselves. So like if that's successful or they have like breakthroughs or, it's not necessarily how many clients I have. I don't really give a shit. Like that doesn't matter to me. Yes, I care about my bills are paid, but I know I don't have to worry about things like that. Just like when I launch new programs or like when I
Yes.
retreat, I know for a fact, and Spirit tells me this all the time. My mentor even tells me this. She sounds like like my higher self half the time, but she'll always say, Lauren, what is going to change if you don't sell 5 coaching spots? What's going to change? And the answer is nothing. It's not going to dramatically affect my life. I'm still going to have all the things that I have. She's like, so let go of that, detach. And as soon as I detach, there's like people, like it's crazy. As soon as I detach, and I've been detaching a lot quicker, because as soon as I detach from the outcome of it, it comes in so much quicker because I'm trying to
Yeah.
control how it's supposed to happen. And I even the other day I was thinking months in advance, like I'm just like very detail oriented, and I'm in my mind. I'm literally just thinking about random stuff, and I'm like, well, how is that going to get paid, or how am I going to do that? And I'm like, God, just stop. Like it's like so ingrained in me that I'm like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's just a reminder. It's just a reminder. Because
Yeah.
what came up for me as you shared that, that's so beautiful, is this idea that, well, first of all, right now in this moment, if we stopped and just paused, if there was a way to pause time, both you and I are okay,
Hmm.
right? You're okay, I'm okay,
Yeah.
we have enough. But
Yeah.
then look at this, like what you talked about is detaching piece. That's actually the enoughness story. Because if you are enough, let's ask this question. If you are enough, if you have enough, if you do enough, if everything is enough, then what comes after is just a bonus, right? It's just from the heart.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the detaching to me. It's like, you are enough the way you are. So if 5 people sign up, or 15, great, or 1,000, doesn't really matter. You're still going to be good enough. You're still going to be enough.
Right. Yeah. And I actually said that story to my boyfriend. He's like, "Oh, then that means you can buy more stuff on TikTok Shop." And I was like, "Okay, you're funny." I'm
There you go.
like, "Yes, but that is material. Like that is more material." Like I'm thinking, I don't know. I guess I'm at this point in my journey that if I don't need it, Spirit's not going to give it to me. Or if I don't, like, for bills, and like, I'm very grateful to be able in a spot that I have a little bit extra surplus, so I can afford different things. I'm not the richest coach in the world, but I'm not the poorest one either. I was at both spectrums, to be like having nothing to like having more, but people are like, well, how did you get there? I'm like, a lot of healing around money wound, right?
Exactly. That's a big one. That's been a big theme for me as well, Lauren.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So just to wrap up, what is like one nugget of wisdom that you want to leave with our audience today?
Yeah. So this keeps coming up. We haven't talked about this, so then it means that it's the one. When it comes to asking better questions, like we talked about, right? One question I like to leave people with, and it's one I ask myself often, is, let's say you're facing challenges in your life right now. They could be small, they could be big. Pick one challenge, doesn't matter which. Maybe start with a small one, and ask yourself this question: what if this were easy? What would it look like? And the last question, my favorite: who would I be if this were easy? Who would I become? Because you see, if you look back in your life, because the past and everything else, it's, you have hindsight 2020.
Right.
When you overcame a challenge, or let's say you were faced with a challenge, let's say you were chasing a promotion, like I was in my corporate career. At the start of the chase, I was someone, right? I was one person. And at the end of the chase, when I got a promotion, I was someone else. So I had to go through a process of transformation from this person to this person. Well, it's the same model you can use for your current situation. That means you're this person now. Who is this person in the future that has this solution solved? Or sorry, has the solution for the challenge you're having? And then if you ask yourself those questions, the answers will come, and you'll see right away that what? That person might be someone that approaches life a bit different. Maybe that person is being someone else. And you start to be able to bring those things in your present moment. Because you see, the questions never asked how, and never asked how the outcome will look like. And you talked about not focusing on the outcome. And there's two things I never focus on, and I recommend to my clients as well and everyone I talk to: the how and the outcome. Because the moment you do that is the moment you put blinders on, and you miss out on so many opportunities. But you
Yeah.
know that your future version will have this challenge solved one way or another. So just look at who the person is and see how you can start becoming that sooner. And that's how people start to go further faster. And you're going to look back a week from now, 2 weeks from now, a month from now, we go, oh my God, I can't believe I did that.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, just speaking upon that, I tried to do it my way multiple times. And every time I ended up in the same spot where I was when I started. And then I was like, fine, you can do it. I'll listen. I'll listen to everything. And then I was like, wow, I didn't think of that. And it's just like, I don't need to. It was like that how of like, oh, I don't have to know what I'm doing here. To be honest, if I meet people that they have it all figured out and they know what they're doing, I was like, oh God, you got a lot to learn.
Yeah, because I mean, let's take the example. Like, let's say your challenge right now is that you want to make more money, okay? And you're stuck in a career you don't like. Well,
Right.
imagine a scenario that this were easy. You got the job of your dreams. Who is that person now? Because I guarantee you it's not the same person you are right now. That
Right.
person might be someone that actually values networking more than you do right now. Maybe that person is someone that values self-care above anything else and gives themselves time to meditate and find their own answers. Maybe that person does a million other things. And guess what? Or sorry, is a million different other things. And then from there, you can find the house. Because if you're someone that networks more, that future person, so you can find the job you want, or the connection, then the house will start to show up. Well, how am I going to network? All of a sudden, a million of options show up, right? In person, virtual, LinkedIn, you name it.
Right. Yeah. Yes. So I love that. So ask the right questions or ask more questions without
Yes,
word how or
exactly.
should.
How or outcome? Yeah. So like the three I ask is, what if this were easy? And if you answer yes, yeah, it could be easy. What would it look like? And the most important one for me is, who would I be? Who would I become in this process? If this were easy and I have this solved, who is that version of Constantine? And that's what I want to focus on.
Yes.
Becoming that person now.
Yeah, I'm going to definitely use that. Thank you so much for all of that.
You're welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode on the Enlightened Misfits podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe. You can leave a review and share with somebody that you feel that will gain knowledge from listening. Stay tuned for more captivating conversations in the future. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and I will see you next time.